welcome in. Latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. Go by SEC Mike on the Twitters. And back again, our great friend, Stephen Lassan, the senior editor over at Athlon Sports. How are you, Stephen?
Mike, it is good to talk to you. A good way to escape from that crazy heat outside is to be talking some SEC ball, right? Mike, the weekends are flying by. Pretty soon we're going to have some games. Are you still working on that lengthy to-do list this offseason?
Yeah, thankfully we got the World Cup. I don't find that terribly entertaining, but it is getting me through it. I've been deep diving, watching all the games from last year as well. So I am finding ways to get more football in my schedule, not less, Steven, because I'm trying to ramp up because I know once the season gets here, it's nothing but ball. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think we are 60 some odd days till the start of college football. It can't get here quick enough.
I mean, Mike, think about it like this. July starts this week, and then once you get through July, August is here, and that means actual football is going to be played. So that's like the best news of all is, this offseason is going to go by pretty fast, I think, the rest of the way, because you get the video game, we got SEC media days, we'll probably get some news here and there, we've got fall camps opening, and then it's like, hey, the sprint to week 0 and week 1. So I mean, bring it on. I love the offseason. It's good to have a breather, but man, I can't wait till we kick this season off. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, so Steven, the last couple of weeks he's been on, he's done a lot of work. He's been breaking down the position groups. For offense, we did 2 weeks ago. Defense, a week ago. Now we're going to break down head coach rankings, coordinator rankings, entering the 2026 season. So before we get into that, we got a lot to talk about. We're going to be able to hit on all 16 teams like we like to do. Can you give us an update, Stephen? How's everything with the Athlon Sports College Football Preview Magazine, and how can the cousins get their hands on one in case they haven't got theirs yet?
Absolutely, Mike. We're getting a great reception from all of the cousins and all the fans. Really appreciate everybody picking it up. It is available at athlonsports.com. Very top magazines. You can click on that. All of the SEC covers covers with SEC players are up there. You can also check out the bookstores, Target, Publix, Walmart. Those are kind of like your best places to pick up a copy of the magazine. I will say, as we get deeper into the summer, it's harder to find them on the newsstand. So always order online because we can ship it to your door. And Mike, with it being like 7,000 degrees outside, like just stay home and like get it shipped to your door, right?
It is. I don't think there's anything better, Stephen, than when it gets this hot out. And those of us that are fortunate enough to have a pool, I certainly don't. But you have a pool or you have access to a pool, hitting there and reading your off-season college football magazine, jumping in the pool. I mean, that was the highlight of my summers growing up.
Man, you're taking me back now. It's like read the Athlon, maybe go fire up the PlayStation 2 or 3 and play some video games all summer day. I mean, I'm getting like wistful for days that were gone that far ago. But man, I was just thinking about this with the magazine and stuff like with media days coming up. I mean, it's a good like catch up thing too, because you're so many, it's 138 teams, there's all the roster changes and coaching changes. I was just finding myself the other week ago, just reading through some of these ACC, Big 12, Big 10, Sun Belt teams one more time to get prepped for the season. So I always think if you're a fan of a team, if anything, this can help get you prepared to some of those other opponents that you're going to play and just get ready for the season because, man, I mean, it's not going to be that long before it's here, and we're talking about a full slate of games in week 1.
Well, and speaking of week 1, that's a perfect transition, Stephen. We had a little bit of news here. It's been a slow news week in the SEC football world, but we did have news today. Oklahoma has moved up their season opener. Obviously, Saturday was where it was scheduled. Now the Sooners will open the season on Friday against UTEP, September 4th now. So they've moved it back a day. So we get SEC football, Sooner football a day earlier. And, of course, we've already had Missouri. They're opening against Peanut Butter on a Thursday. So we got Thursday, SEC. Now we got Friday. Obviously, we got all day Saturday. And then Ole Miss Sunday. So, heck of a slate here of games week one. Any thoughts, Stephen, on Oklahoma moving their game up? And, again, I don't know how much this is truly an advantage, but I'd rather have an extra day to prep before we hit the road and go to our big game at Michigan, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Mike, I think that's probably one of the driving forces behind this. I mean, first of all, it's going to be like, 500 degrees for the first weekend. So you get the game out of the way on Friday night. It should be an easy win over UTEP. UTEP, we just talked about getting familiar with teams. Mike, they're moving from Conference USA over to the Mountain West. They are projected near the bottom of the Mountain West this year. So should be an easy win for Oklahoma. You get some extra guys, some snaps, then you get ready for Michigan. So I think that's really the advantage for this is getting this game done a day earlier to start thinking about that massive week 2 matchup. And selfishly, Mike, as a college football fan, if we can watch one of the top 15 teams in the country solo Friday night, not one of like 500 games on at the same time, count me in. We just need an SEC game on Monday night now.
Yeah, I always am a big fan of these games. I mean, let's call it what it is. How many people are truly fired up, unless you're a diehard Sooner, for week one, Oklahoma versus UTEP? Now, and how many people nationally are going to watch that game on a Saturday? I know the Sooners, you always want it on Saturday. I get it, but for the rest of us, it allows us to zero in on, give full attention to a game we normally wouldn't. So I'm always in favor of just, I'm not saying every game on Friday, but one, particularly the opener, I don't have any problem with this. In fact, I love it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike, because on Saturday, I mean, just think about how many games are going to be on the Saturday slate for the first weekend, and the games are all one-sided. So if you can move it to a Friday opportunity, it's a great opportunity for Oklahoma to showcase how awesome this team is probably going to be. Also, just from an intrigue standpoint, I mean, it's a first look for us to kind of see like, hey, is this offense going to take that step forward? How much do you show with Michigan coming up in week 2? So I just love the opportunity to see some of these teams like in the solo window where you can focus on them, because on Saturday, especially that first weekend of the season, there are so many games on. They're all one-sided. If we can see it in its own window, that's just going to add to the intrigue and getting some early scouting out of the way, like I said, for that huge Michigan game in week 2.
Mm-hmm. All right, and then just the one other thing, slow news week in the SEC, but there is one thing Stephen wanted to talk about. Anytime he can kick the balls while they're down, I guess. But Chaz Coleman, anybody that missed it, Tennessee has officially parted ways with their touted transfer, the gem of their transfer class. Whoops, so much for that. Chaz Coleman not going to be a part of Tennessee's football team officially this season. Tennessee has a big need for a pass rusher. It's why they spent the money they did to get Chaz Coleman. Now, it's my understanding, Stephen, they didn't really pay him that much. Once he was, again, for those that don't know, he wasn't even there for spring, really. He came and then quickly exited. And Tennessee said, all right, well, we're not going to pay you if this is going to be the way. So they it's my understanding that they had his contract then backloaded and structured to where he had to play to get the money. And obviously he's not going to play, so he's not going to get the vast majority of the money. So having said all that, Stephen, thoughts on Chaz Coleman and Tennessee parting ways here?
It's weird to say this. A guy who didn't take a snap for Tennessee is a fairly significant loss, just because of the potential that he brought to Tennessee's defense, the ability to get to the quarterback in a year where Tennessee has question marks about who's going to be able to get to the quarterback. It also not really surprised Mike, because it felt like it was headed for this, especially when he wasn't there necessarily in the summer and the spring. Like, it was trending to this kind of destination, I think, a while back. So I guess the good news is it's happening now. It's not happening in August 20th, right before the season opener. Jim Knowles now has a long off season to figure this out. And I think I go back to what you and I talked about a few weeks ago with the defensive rankings. Tennessee is loaded at linebacker. How does Jim Knowles deploy the linebackers now knowing that you've got that massive question mark with Chaz Coleman no longer on the team. Like Jordan Norman, the Tulane transfer, I suspect will be a big part of the pass rush. But you've got some guys at linebacker, some younger players that are going to have to maybe have some extra versatility. So that's the silver lining in this is for Tennessee is that it's not happening prior to week 1 or 2. It's happening now, and that gives you time to adjust.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Stephen. Again, you need as many pass rushers as you possibly can. You have aspirations to make the playoff and win a national championship. So losing potentially someone that you had suited as your number one pass rusher, obviously that's a huge blow. But if I may, look at the silver lining here, Stephen. We got a new strength and conditioning coach at Tennessee. He just I don't know what would be the word there. He helped produce Indiana. He's there under Signetti and JMU before that. So obviously they had a lot of success. You know, Kurt Signetti said, Google me. Maybe he should have said, Google my strength coach because he's putting in all the work. But I kid. But point being, Stephen, this guy's come in and it's my understanding he's pretty militant and he's kind of a hard ass. And if we got day one guys coming in here thinking they don't have to work out and they can play, I mean, what the hell's the point of having a hard ass strength coach that's trying to make us one of the toughest teams in the conference? So yeah, I could see an angle where you're saying, well, this is good because now we're not putting up with this BS anymore under Josh Heupel. We've had the Nico, we've had Boo Carter, and all these incidents are not necessarily related. But I think it's good to get it out there that, hey, we're not going to bend over backwards for even star players that we may need. And like you said, now there's plenty of time to adjust and try to figure out who can fill that void because Chaz Coleman's not going to be there this year.
Mike, I do think setting the standard is critical here, you know, for Tennessee because they have been burned like on the NIL and some of the transfers recently. So sort of setting that standard, and especially after a year where they went from the playoff to regressing back down in the win total, not by much, but it does feel like, hey, it's a pretty important season for Josh Heupel to kind of show like, hey, we're not going to be stuck at 7-5 or 8-4. I'm making the right changes to get the program back into playoff contention. And one of the ways you do that, sort of like setting your culture, setting your standard. We talk about culture as kind of like a buzzword, like what the heck does it mean? But I think it's like what you said, is like, hey, you have to come in here and work. And also, if I'm a Tennessee defensive lineman and I'm looking at what just happened at Indiana and I'm seeing, you know, they put guys in the NFL, they've got guys on the All-America, all Big Ten team that weren't necessarily the most highly recruited coming out of high school, I'd be looking at that going, whatever they're doing, I want to do it and I want to get better at it. So this is the best way to do it, is to hire that strength and conditioning coach and continue to develop and train and everything for the season. So I think Josh Heupel has made good moves this offseason to get Tennessee back on track. Yes, it's a loss to lose Chaz Coleman, but I think Tennessee can manufacture some things with Jim Knowles and some of the linebackers they have. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to me as we get into fall practice, is to read and parse through what exactly is going on in Knoxville to see how they can overcome that.
Mm-hmm. All right, Stephen, let us delay no longer. Let's jump into the show topic here. Ranking coaches in the SEC for 2026. And how about we start with offensive coordinators and we start at the bottom, work our way to the best. Now, I outlined for Stephen, he said, well, do we want play callers or we want offensive coordinators? I said, because we'll get to the head coaches, but let's go with the guys that are officially listed as offensive coordinators. Any other insight you'd like to share or analysis before we reveal these rankings, Stephen?
Yeah, Mike, I think this is kind of a tough assignment because even if you take the play call or the offensive coordinator title, you still have to factor in like the guy calling the plays because like it is, you know, effectiveness and success. So I did take into account like overall offensive success. And I also think there's another S word, which is subjectivity. I mean, we watch the offenses, we know the stats, we know the track record, we know the history. Those things all added up to these rankings. So I thought offense was a lot easier than defense. I'll just say that. I think defensive coordinators look a little bit more loaded to me than offensive coordinators right now.
I think so. So I can't wait to see how the Cousins react. And shout out to you, Stephen, for putting a coordinator at 16th below a coordinator that's never called a play in his life. Shout out number 16. Who we got here, Stephen?
Mike, that's Joe Sloan. So he is a play caller, of course. He was at LSU, but if you look at the track record, 8th and 13th in scoring the last 2 years. I think it is a misstep by Will Stein to not be the play caller. He is very good at this. We saw this at Oregon. He produced high-powered offenses. So you might be wondering, why is he 16? Maybe there's a guy ahead of him who hasn't called a play. I think it's just that his offenses at LSU just frankly were not very good. And I felt like they did not maximize the talent. And so somebody who's one step ahead on this list, I know it's risky. There's also a little bit of reward as somebody as a first-time play caller, maybe with a little bit of upside. So Sloan probably also weighed down too by the fact that Will Stein is still going to play a role in this offense. I just don't like this hire. If you're good at something, you should do it earlier in your career to get this program on track. So I would like to see Will Stein be the play caller.
And here's the problem, and maybe because it's not necessarily fair to old Joe Sloan, but let us pretend for a moment here, Stephen, and you would know better than I, because I truthfully don't pay much attention to these guys when they're outside the SEC. It's not that the rest of the college football sucks or anything like that, but it's just this is where I make my bread over here in the SEC. So I'll watch Missouri Vanderbilt over Ohio State Michigan. I don't give a damn. But point being, Stephen, and I know he's head coach, and I know he'll factor in, but he's been very on record saying, I'm not the play caller. If Will Stein was the play caller, would we arguably have a top 5 play caller in the Southeastern Conference? And instead of that, we're going with dead last. I mean, that is a massive, massive, massive drop-off, in my opinion.
I think you could make a case he'd be the number 1 offensive coordinator. I mean, he was one of the most dynamic, effective, whatever kind of words you want to use during his time at Oregon. Also feels like, I know we'll talk about this. The top of the SEC at coordinator, you could go with a couple names. So if somebody wanted to make the case that if you just ranked offensive coordinators prior to last season, I think Will Stein would have rated very high at Oregon. There was nothing that happened last year to knock him down the list. So if he's the full-time offensive coordinator play caller, Mike, I think some people would have him number 1 in the conference for sure. So that's why I think it's a misstep. I know it's a very hard job to do as a first-time head coach, but you're good at it. You're trying to get the program off the ground. I would take the play sheet and be the OC play caller for year 1.
And he may be by week 2 or 3 if things go poorly for Kentucky. So, again, I don't want to kick them anymore. They've had a rough. They're going to be 16-0, Stephen. Just you watch. But speaking of 15th, a guy that's never even called plays, and again, we got him ahead of Joe Sloan here, which I don't know. I take no issue with. Oh, you got 15th there, Stephen.
Mike, we're going with somebody we have questioned also this offseason, and that is Holman Wiggins, the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M. So I think fair to say, hey, Joe Sloan's more proven. He could be ahead of him. Here's why I went with Wiggins at 15 is I just think we've seen enough out of Sloan to kind of know what he is. If you didn't maximize talent at LSU, are you going to do that at Kentucky? I have a hard time envisioning that. Where I think you give Wiggins a bit of a nod here is you have to say, Elko trusts him. He is a first-time play caller, but perhaps there is some like untapped upside, kind of rising star thing you could tap into. I have questions about it. He does know the personnel. A&M's got great receivers. He was the receivers coach. Maybe they figure out a way to deploy the offense a little bit better this season in key moments like we saw in the playoff game. There's a lot of questions here, Mike, but I went with upside. We've seen Joe Sloan. We'll see out of Holman Wiggins this year. They felt 15 and 16 pretty clear to me.
And I don't know that you ever make a hire to please a quarterback. I think that'd be a wrong way to do it. But I wonder how much of a fan Marcel Reed was of this hire. I would have to imagine he liked it. You know what I mean? Because, again, you're going into a make-or-break year with him, and you want him to have a big – if he was totally against it, again, I don't know that he'd come out and outright say it or anything. But point being, Stephen, I think continuity. He's seeing this guy in the facility every day, seeing how well the receivers are doing. And, I think he's had the co-offensive coordinator, like passing game coordinator title for at least a year or two. So I'm sure he's pretty locked in on what they're doing there. But point being is I have to imagine Marcel Reed is fired up about this, which that may have factored into Coach Elko's decision as well.
Also think it's important that Texas A&M doesn't need to like reinvent the wheel here offensively. They weren't obviously they took a step forward on offense in Colin Klein's second year. So by promoting Wiggins, you allow yourself that opportunity to like build on what you did last season, build on that success, build on the things you were doing well, maximize those receivers again this season. And also, Mike, I think you hit on probably the most important thing. Marcel Reed is the guy that's going to probably make or break Texas A&M season. Yes, the offensive line is brand new, but man, if he can elevate his game to another level, we're not seeing the games against top 10, top 15 opponents. He plays a little bit better. Then A&M is back in the playoff. But most importantly, there's that prior relationship, and I think at this point, with a quarterback that's coming back with the weapons, I understand why Elko promoted, and I think continuity plus tweaks. Probably not a bad way to go here, considering what you did last year and what you have coming back.
All right, so who do you got number 14, Stephen?
Mike, it's a tough one because Alex Golesh plays a big part of the Auburn offense, but we're going to go with Joe Gordon. Alex Golesh did kind of clarify this spring that Joe Gordon was the primary play caller, albeit Alex Golesh will play some sort of role. Obviously, we don't want to see a repeat if you're an Auburn fan of this guy's going to call plays on first and second down, and this guy's going to play third down. So the good news is I think that Auburn's current offensive staff has its stuff together. At South Florida, Gordon and Golesh, that combo helped South Florida average over 30 points a game in all 3 years and over 40 in 2025. So offensive mastermind supposedly was fired. I think Gordon and Golesh know what the heck they're doing, and we'll see some improvement right away this year.
Right. And again, so this is the challenge that I presented Stephen. I mean, we could have easily said Golesh, and we know he'll factor in. And these guys are all on the headset, right? So I'm sure if at any point they don't like the play that's called, they're like, hey, let's run this instead. And the only thing is these guys, only Hugh Freeze is the one out here who publicly will be like, if a play works, I called it. Right. If it didn't work, he called it. I mean, I don't know any of these other guys. Now they'll do it privately. I've seen it, but I don't know publicly that, they're going to take credit for all the good calls and blame other people for the bad calls. But that's kind of, it's difficult to parse who's calling all these plays necessarily.
It really is. And how do you weigh Joe Gordon's ranking versus saying Alex Golesh? Because if it's Golesh solely, he probably ranks a lot higher on this list. Albeit, I mean, Gordon on his own, whether it's at South Florida, in the past couple of years, they were very productive, kind of as I mentioned. But that's the challenge, because even if you say, well, he's the offensive coordinator, you can't take the head coach's knowledge out of this equation too. So, Mike, it's a tough assignment. I think so far we've done a good job, right?
I think so, but 13th. Oh, buddy, I couldn't believe this guy rated this high, Stephen.
Mike, your favorite coordinator, Chip Lindsey. I'm surprised you didn't have me rank him 16th or maybe even 17th or 18th. Mike, this is not one of my favorite coordinator hires of the offseason. He does bring experience, whether it's the offensive coordinator at North Carolina, Michigan, Arizona State, Auburn, a ton of places. So I think maybe the most generous interpretation of the Chip Lindsey hire is the ceiling isn't very high, but there's a pretty solid floor. And considering where he's worked, he's pulling from a lot of different stops. Maybe they've got a lot of different schemes and different things he can add to the playbook at Missouri to tweak what has been working for the most part. I think the other thought is he has worked with quarterbacks before, and you need somebody to help Austin Simmons and his game go to the next level. So you can kind of see where this is going. The guy who's worked with Drake May, he worked with Bryce Underwood at Michigan. trying to develop Austin Simmons and being a quarterback coach. I could see where this is going. Michigan's offense wasn't all that great last year, so maybe that's weighing into my mind here. It feels like a very low risk, low reward hire, but could be pretty solid in the end.
Let me ask you this, Stephen. Depending on how well Austin Simmons performs this fall, I think we will be sitting here saying, like, if Austin Simmons is really good, we'll be like, Chip Lindsey's a hell of a coordinator. If Austin Simmons is not good, and I think we've seen enough. We know he's good, but if he's turning the ball over and they lose games, I think we'll be saying Chip Lindsey can't coach just a lick. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's fair or not. I think it's really going to come down to how well Austin Simmons performs.
I agree with you, because I think just thinking about how Missouri has performed the last couple of years under Eli Drinkwitz. I mean, they have figured out a good formula on defense. They've done a good job in talent identification, recruiting through the portal. We know they can run the ball. Like, the missing piece is kind of like a high-level quarterback, with Austin Simmons. So I think his play is kind of like one of the X factors of the SEC. But I think, to your point of, if he doesn't take that step forward, is Missouri looking for a new OC next year? Maybe. I think there's a lot of pressure on Chip Lindsey, considering how much talent and upside Simmons brings to the lineup, and what that could also mean for Missouri if he hits this year.
And again, how effective and available is Ahmad Hardy.
Yeah.
That will factor in as well. But all right, Stephen, number 12, where you got?
Well, I couldn't even say the word right. Familiarity, Mike, because we're going to Oxford, where John David Baker ranks number 12. I love the fact that he has previous experience at Ole Miss, coming back after 2 years at East Carolina, where they averaged over 30 points a game in back-to-back situations. So this is kind of the Holman Wiggins thing, where you've been good. You don't need to make a ton of changes. Just keep it rolling. Here's somebody in Baker who's been productive, and he's also knows the program and knows the culture. Just keep it going. I think it's the perfect hire for Ole Miss. He's not hired because he's only been an offensive coordinator for 2 years.
Yeah, just don't. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah, bingo.
So, again, we've been very successful in Oxford on the offensive side of the football. We've got an elite quarterback. We got an elite running back. There's no need to tinker with what we're doing. The only thing I think you might want to tinker, again, maybe you don't, because it's just your DNA and it works so well, is just tempo all the time. Now, I know that's part of the effectiveness, wearing down opponents, snapping it when they're not ready. But with Pete Golding as your defensive coordinator, also, you also got to realize that's going to wear down your defense. And in an era where you can't stack up depth, particularly on either side of the ball, but definitely not on defense, I don't think you want your offense snapping the ball 80, 90 times, because that means your defense is going to see a ton of snaps themselves. So that would be my only thing to watch. How quickly does Ole Miss run the tempo? Again, to completely abandon it would be foolish. I'm not suggesting that, but I just wonder if they're going to go quite the warp speed they have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You almost wonder if they could be more strategic about it, and especially in those big-time matchups against an LSU, Georgia, Texas. You can kind of use it during the season more when you need to, like the critical toss-up games, the games that matter a lot for playoff positioning, because you also wonder, Pete Golding being a defensive-minded head coach, that what are they going to do to help protect that defense? Because you have a tougher schedule with 9 games. You've got Louisville in the non-con. It's not going to be easy to just kind of run it back and go right back to the semifinals by just doing the same thing. With depth of question, first-time head coach, like I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they are a little bit more strategic. Like, you don't want to go from what's worked, but you also want to protect yourself for that long haul of a season with 9 SEC games.
And do you also think, Stephen, it would be fair to say John David Baker, by the end of the year, we could be like, whoa, this guy is elite because
Mike,
you got Trinidad. And then by next year, we're like, oh, this guy can't coach a lick.
yeah, I was just thinking that too, Mike, because in theory, like John David Baker could make himself quite a bit of money this year. He could be like the next guy that goes from, really good assistant in the SEC to head coach, like in the Sun Belt or Conference USA or the American, like one of the G6 conferences. So, he's being handed like a Ferrari that's going 200 miles an hour. And if it takes a step back this year, he's going to be the guy that gets blamed for it, because unless there's some sort of massive injury, there's really nothing that should slow this offense down, right? So he's going to be the fall guy, or somebody that makes a lot of money as he looks for maybe some head coaching gigs in the near future.
All right, so Stephen, who you got? Number 11, offensive coordinator in the SEC.
Mike, we are going to Fayetteville to take Tim Cramsey, the new offensive coordinator at Arkansas. So he's 11th, but I feel pretty good about this hire if I'm Arkansas. He doesn't have P4 experience. He's been at Marshall, he's been at Sam Houston, FIU, Montana State. He's been at Memphis the last couple of years. Memphis led the American in scoring in 2023 and 2024, productive pretty much since Cramsey got there. So the productivity at the lower level was there. High bar to clear because Petrino was so good last season. So interested to see how it translates to the SEC. But the production, everything you want to see has been there so far.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey. So I think we're going to be really effective on the offensive side of the football. I've heard some growing optimism that they think the defense is going to be pretty good. I don't know quite where they're getting at, but I get, hey, fingers crossed. I hope that's
it's a long off season, Mike. We talk ourselves into anything.
But let me ask you this, Stephen, because maybe you may have missed it. Shane and I, we did our over-unders last week, yesterday. Go back and check that out when this show's done. But we have 4.5 is the official over-under for Arkansas. And a two-parter here for you, Stephen, because, again, I'm kind of ignorant of these teams outside of the Southeastern Conference. I was going to ask you about Utah, but before you get into them, kind of here's my rationale here. And I hope Arkansas goes on the road and beats the hell out of Utah week 2. But how realistic is that when you're completely overhauling the coaching staff and the roster? Honestly, I have no idea. But I'm chalking that up as a toss-up at best, and it probably a lean to Utah. Again, I am ignorant of them. But point being, Stephen, if they lose to Utah, which I'm not guaranteeing it or anything, but if they do, that means they're going to have to win 3 Southeastern Conference games to hit the over. What is the likelihood they do that?
Mike, that feels very difficult to do, especially considering how this team was in SEC play last year. I know it's a new season, but when you go 2-10, it's still going to be a pretty steep climb to get to that SEC win total. Mike, the other thing is when you asked about Utah. I think if you want to play Utah, I think this is actually the year to get them because they have a new head coach, Morgan Scalley. He was their defensive coordinator. It's about as seamless of a transition as you could get. I mean, Scalley's from Utah. He played at Utah. He coached at Utah. He's basically a Utah guy through and through. They're not going to change a whole lot, but they are breaking in a brand new offensive and defensive line. That has been where Utah, you could almost count on them every year to be great on the offensive line and defensive line. So they don't lose very often at home. And I think that's the challenge for Arkansas, is to go on the road and beat a Utah team that has been tough at home with 2 good quarterbacks that Utah has, despite all the change. So I think it's very fair to have Arkansas as an underdog there. But if they win that game, then I think the conversation changes, because Ryan Silverfield can look at all the people who were skeptical of the hire and say, look, we just went on the road and maybe beat a top 25 team. Look at all the good stuff we're doing. We probably 2-0 at that point. Just don't tell anybody that Georgia's up next on the schedule.
And the final thing I wanted to ask you, again, I didn't mean to spend so much time on Arkansas, but with, very few people give them much love, so I wanted to give them some love here. But I would make the statement, I know it's 2 first-year coaches for both programs, Utah and Arkansas, but I would think the weight of the world is on the Utah coach to beat Arkansas, whereas I don't think there's any pressure on Silverfield to get that win. Would you agree with that statement?
100%, Mike. I think if Utah loses to Arkansas and kind of most people are going to have Arkansas pretty low in the preseason rankings. They're going to be picked 15th, 16th in the SEC. If Utah loses that game, it's already like immediate doubt in the Morgan Scalley era. Whereas for Arkansas, you're an underdog. You're not going to be picked very high. You're on the road. Everybody's picking against you. The crowd's going to be against you. So they got nothing to lose. It's all on Utah to win this game and hold serve for the Big 12 at home.
I agree. All right, so now we're into the top 10, Stephen. Number 10, offensive coordinator in the SEC.
Mike, I like potential. So we're going with Ben Arbuckle at 10. A lot of positives, I think, stacking up for Oklahoma. Number 1, our coach scouting was very high on Ben Arbuckle and the potential of this Oklahoma offense in our magazine. Also think watching this Oklahoma offense last year, the scheme and the play calling seemed pretty solid to me. Of course, you can always nitpick something here or there about an offensive coordinator, but I think they're on the right track. And I think with the injuries, first time, new quarterback and OC working in a new conference, like there was a lot of change last year, plus the injury to Mateer. I know it's a lot of potential here, but I think Oklahoma is going to match that potential. And I think Arbuckle will be a coordinator that moves up these ranks by the end of 2026.
All the way at number 10. Did you see John Mateer's arms the other day?
I know. Yeah. See, like he's going to play like defense. Like we knew Oklahoma was desperate for defensive line depth.
Well, it's funny, Stephen. I mean, I think by the end of the year, a lot of people, one of 2 things is going to happen. A lot of people are going to owe Ben Arbuckle an apology, or his ass getting fired. And I don't know that there's any in between. They got to deliver this year. And I'm not saying they got to be the best offense in the conference, but they got to do their part, because they might need to play a little bit better. I know expectations sky high. I don't think I've talked to a Sooner this offseason, Stephen, that thinks the defense isn't going to be better. And that's quite a statement, considering how great they were. And I'm not saying they won't be as great, but that's a tough bar to set. So if they take a slight step back on defense, I think they could take a big step forward on offense and be an even better team.
I think Oklahoma was first nationally in defensive success rate last year. Mike, if they regress to 5th, they're still an elite defense. And if they scored 22 points a game in SEC play last year. If they're scoring close to 30, even if your defense is maybe just like a tick worse than last year, I mean, we're talking about a team that could be in Atlanta playing for the SEC championship game. So there is a ton of pressure, because it feels like there's no excuses, because you've got an offensive line that should develop, you've got good skill talent, and you've got a quarterback that, hopefully, knock on wood, does not get injured early in the season and stays healthy and builds on the potential we've seen so far. So like you said, Mike, Ben Arbuckle has a lot of potential, but also the other P word, pressure, this year to get this offense on track.
Well, speaking of pressure, Stephen, number 9, offensive coordinator in the SEC is
Philip Montgomery. And so this ranking is weighted because Jeff Lebby does factor some into this. Philip Montgomery, longtime offensive assistant. I think the thing you like the most if you're a Mississippi State fan, Montgomery and Lebby, they worked together in the past at Baylor, so there's familiarity. Can be kind of like a trusted right-hand man, knowing the system in and out. It gives Lebby maybe some flexibility to sort of be that program CEO that you need to, considering all the demands on head coaches now. So Montgomery's experience, it's Lebby's offense. I think this tandem is a pretty good one for Mississippi State.
Yeah, and I'll say Montgomery's stock went up, Stephen, when he went to Auburn. And then Hugh kicked him out and said, "Oh, it was all that guy's fault." Then they just got worse on offense. You know what?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's an endorsement of Philip Montgomery's offensive ability, right? Is that they should
I
have
think
kept
so.
him around.
But yeah, I mean, I've made fun of Jeff Lebby to no end because I think he is not fit to be a head coach in this conference. But if we want to factor him in as an offensive coordinator, I think he's one of the better quarterback coaches and play callers in this conference. So again, no shade to him as a offensive mind.
If you just rank Jeff Lebby, I think he would be higher on this list. But that's the challenge is it's Lebby's offense, but Montgomery's going to play some sort of role. Like we combine, I guess essentially they're almost like middle of the conference, which kind of makes sense because your head coach is essentially your play caller.
Right, and that's the same deal for number 8, Stephen.
Mike, it is Joey Halsey / Josh Heupel. If this is Josh Heupel on its own, then Josh Heupel's probably much higher on this list, certainly much closer to the top 5. But, Halsey's been the offensive coordinator for Tennessee since Alex Golesh left. Tennessee, was 7th in the SEC in scoring in 2023, but they've been in the top 2 the last 2 years. Pretty remarkable for Tennessee, to cycle through quarterbacks and keep this thing going, whether it's strong run game, Joey Aguilar last year. I think that Tennessee's hard to rank just simply because Hype will play such a role. What exactly is like, how do you evaluate Halsey's job so far? So Tennessee's middle of the conference. If it's Hype on its own, he's just in the top 5 on his own.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And our friend Dave Bartu, CFB Matrix, he's got his rating system's got Heupel as the number 1 play caller in the conference, and Halsey is the number 1 quarterback coach. Which again, he's not some Tennessee homer. He's from Oregon, and he's a Duck. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth. But I think when you combine those two, I think that's another reason to have optimism for Tennessee this offseason or heading into the fall.
I think the optimism ought to stem from just looking how the offense has performed and evolved with the personnel. You have Nico leave in the spring. Joey Aguilar steps in. The offense continues to be productive. When you make the playoff, it's Dylan Sampson leading the way. It's the run game. It's the defense. Like Tennessee's won different ways. They've had Hendon Hooker. They won with Joe Milton. I think Tennessee's going to find a way offensively, and it may be baby steps early as one of the quarterbacks grows into it. But I think Halsey, Heupel, they're going to be fine on offense this year for Tennessee.
Now, this number 7, Stephen, I think maybe their fans may not be happy with this ranking, but arguably they've gone from 15, 16 all the way to the top half. So who do you got as the number 7 offensive coordinator in the SEC?
Mike, this is tricky territory because I think he could be higher, and then you're also starting to factor in another head coach OC debate here. But it's Kendall Briles at South Carolina. Easily, I think, could be a few spots higher on this list. Mike, I think you nailed it when you said, if you look at this ranking last year, South Carolina's near the bottom. Now they've got essentially a top 5 offensive coordinator. The positives for Kendall Briles have been just like instant offense, productivity, whether it's been at Arkansas before and at TCU the last couple of years. The one thing I wanted to see at TCU that I didn't was better offensive balance. Like TCU's run games were consistently like middle to the back half of the Big 12. They made a change this year after Briles left. They're going to try to get more run oriented. So just thinking about how that might translate, South Carolina is going to get a lot better on offense right away, but I still want to see them get that physicality, get that run game going. We know the questions on the offensive line. That's what I want to see out of Briles. So, Mike, he's 7, but I feel like the top 7 or 8 or so are all pretty close. Would you agree with that?
I think so, and I think his instant impact could be massive for the Gamecocks this season. So I can't wait to see Sellers with a competent offensive coordinator, perhaps for the first time in his playing career.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's going to be so great to see Sellers like maximizing that talent and I think about that run that South Carolina nearly made to the playoff and how awesome he was during that stretch. Like if we could get that Lenore Sellers for 12 weeks, I mean, we're talking about, somebody who's going to be, maybe first, second team all SEC if Bryles can get him to that level.
All right, so who do you got number 6, Steven?
This is a tricky one, Mike, because it's AJ Milwee and Kyle Flood. If you don't know who those guys are, well, that's basically the Texas offensive coordinator tandem to go with Steve Sarkisian. Considering Sarkisian is pretty much the primary play caller, that's why Texas took the nod a little bit higher here. If you want to critique something, Mike, it's definitely been kind of inconsistent play in the red zone. I mean, Texas was up and down last year on offense. I expected more out of this group, considering Sark's track record. Similar to Josh Heupel, if you want to move Sark a few spots higher just based upon his own merit as a play caller, I'm not going to disagree with you. It's very difficult, like I said, to weigh that title versus play caller in this too.
Right, so a little unfair to Steven, but that is the shackles I gave him with these rankings. So for the first time in his life, Steven's got Texas outside the top 5.
It was a mandate from you this time, right?
All right, so that means we're at number 5. Steven, who you got as the number 5 offensive coordinator at ESCC?
Another one that's like, how much do you weigh head coach or offensive coordinator? And it's Charlie Weis Jr. Obviously, there is the Lane Kiffin factor. However, strong showing for Charlie Weis Jr. in the playoff last year after Kiffin went to LSU and Weis took on the offensive play caller responsibility, full control for that playoff run. Ole Miss was top 5 every year in offense under Kiffin and Weis. They led the SEC in scoring in 2024. So instant impact for Kendall Bryles at South Carolina. Mike, I think Charlie Weis Jr. and Lane Kiffin are going to do the same thing at LSU.
Yeah, and like you said there, I know Trinidad, Pete Golding, a lot of these players and coaches, their stock rose during that epic playoff run, but I don't know if anybody's stock rose more than Charlie Weis Jr. Any surprise that he went with Kiffin? I know this is old news and all that, but it was an opportunity for him to step out on his own and be solely responsible for the offense. And a lot of people behind the scenes for a long time have been saying Charlie Weis is calling the plays, and I don't think many people believed it. But I think that playoff run really proved it. What a sharp offensive mind he is.
If you want to be a head coach, and I assume Charlie Weis Jr. would like to be, to work with Trinidad Chambliss for another year and keep the good thing going at Ole Miss, Mike, that's a pretty good opportunity to sort of show your head coaching credentials. So maybe there is a little bit of surprise there. I think the other one is like the working relationship with Kiffin and continuing what you've built so far at Ole Miss. But I think there was the coaching situation, all the turnover, Mike, like you said, the one coach I was interested to see in all of that in that playoff run was Weis Jr., to see how he would handle everything, especially because when you watch every time Kiffin's over there with the play sheet, he's throwing the clipboard. I mean, he plays some role, but the offense just maintained its success in the playoff, and that was a good sign for Charlie Weis Jr.
Okay, number 4. This is a name I think a lot of people don't know still, but he did a heck of a job last year.
Tim Beck, Mike, over at Vanderbilt. I think he is the perfect offensive coordinator for Vanderbilt. Does a little something different. He's hard to prepare for, and he maximizes talent. Vanderbilt was second in the SEC in scoring last year. I am very curious to see how Vanderbilt's offense performs after Diego Pavia and now with Jared Curtis.
Yeah, so this is going to be it's kind of the biggest question I have for him. Not really doubting him, but without having a generational quarterback, how effective will he be? And he's never had an elite offense to the level that he had last year. So it is a credit to him. But how much of it was Diego? How much it was Eli Stowers? They had some really good receivers. I don't want to take away all the credit from them, but man, if they do anything similar this year with a true freshman, it may not be the freshman, but it likely will. If they do anything similar with a true freshman, then Tim Beck's probably got to move up this list.
Absolutely. Mike, I think we'll get to number one in a minute here, Mike, but I think you could kind of toss 1 through, I think, what was it, like 8 or 9, kind of in a tier of their own, kind of competing for the top spot. Just based upon the production, second in the SEC in scoring last year at a place like Vanderbilt. Also, I think give Tim Beck some credit too for like developing Diego Pavia, like Eli Stowers. Like those guys were good, but they became like All America, All SEC good in this offense too. So I think Beck does a good job with the actual offensive mechanics, but getting the most out of these players too seems to be a strength. And I think that bodes well for Jared Curtis and this offense in 2026 and beyond.
And if I'm not mistaken, Stephen, didn't Eli Stowers, I know for a fact he was a quarterback at one point, I think at A&M. I don't know, when did he start that transition? Was it at New Mexico State under Tim Beck?
Believe it was, at New Mexico State when he moved from quarterback to tight end.
So again, I mean, I'm sure there's other coaches. So I'm not giving Tim Beck all the credit, but again, to take a guy that didn't make it at quarterback, turn him into an All-American tight end, I mean, that's pretty dang impressive too.
Very impressive. But it kind of gets at like when you're at a place like Vanderbilt or New Mexico State, you have to find ways to maximize your talent because you're going to be at a disadvantage to most of the teams in the conference. And so that's why I think Tim Beck is kind of the perfect hire or OC for Vanderbilt here to get the most out of the roster.
All right, Stephen, number 3. Can't wait to see the reaction to this one.
Mike, do you think that most people are going to say he's too high?
Of course.
Yeah, it's Mike Bobo. Like, he gets a lot of flack and at times very, very deserved. At the same time, the last 3 years, Georgia is 2nd, 5th, and 6th in the SEC in scoring. I think you have to give Bobo credit for the longevity, like whether it's his first tenure at Georgia and the tenure now of being successful as a play caller, offensive coordinator. I think it's also a pretty important year for him too. We know the questions that they have at receiver. What kind of step forward does Gunnar Stockton take? I think Mike Bobo is really, really good. I also don't think he's as good as Todd Monken, and that's a really difficult place to live up to when you have somebody who was that good as your play caller. So top 5, Mike, but also kind of in this cluster of you could move him down a few spots, and I wouldn't argue. You could also argue he could be number 2 in this list, and I wouldn't argue with you.
Yeah, I think he's very good. There's things you could pick apart. He's been around the SEC for so long. The vast majority of these guys have not because they get fired. If you're around for 10 plus years, there's always going to, can you believe he didn't run Todd Gurley on the goal line? I mean, I get it. But was that great? No, but insert literally every other coordinator that was active in the SEC. What are they doing right now? They're probably retired, fired. We're at G6. You know what I mean? So
kind of analysts too. Yeah.
Right? So there's something to be said for not only staying power, but it's like people act like Georgia is, inept on offense while they're beating the hell out of everybody. You know what?
Right. I think the productivity has been there. I think at times I would like to see maybe a little bit more creativity, but that's also kind of weighing the Todd Monken factor in this, Mike. I thought Todd Monken was one of the most creative offensive minds, like in the SEC when he was at Georgia nationally. It just doesn't feel like it's at that level, and that's a difficult place for Bobo to be. But there are always plays and drives you can nitpick. At the same time, if Bobo's been a pretty effective offensive coordinator for 7, 8 plus 9, 10 years, I think that says something given the way the game has evolved in college football during that time period.
All right, Stephen, number 2, offensive coordinator of the SEC. I think a lot of SEC fans still don't know much about this guy.
Mike, this is one of my favorite coordinator hires of 2026. I mentioned creativity with Todd Monken, Buster Faulkner at Florida. The stale offensive days of Billy Napier, Mike, they are done. You won't fall asleep watching Florida this year, Mike. That's the good news. Because Buster Faulkner, the creativity, the usage of formations and run game and the motions and everything we've seen at Georgia Tech, I cannot wait to see how this plays out at Florida. Because you're going to have the great receiving core. You've got Jaden Baugh. 1st in yards per play and 4th in scoring offense at Georgia Tech. last year. Also, Haynes King got a lot better at Georgia Tech once he transferred from Texas A&M. So this is kind of like Tim Beck, taking advantage of talent, maximizing it, being creative, developing players that were maybe underutilized at a previous stop. I think Buster Faulkner is one of the top offensive coordinator hires in the country for 2026, and I think we will see a much improved Florida offense this year.
Man, that's got to be music to Gator fans' ears after the Billy Napier refusing to hire to go from refusing to hire a coordinator, perhaps having the second best coordinator in the Southeastern Conference. I don't know if you can do better than that.
Also, Mike, one of Billy Napier's first moves at James Madison was to hire an offensive coordinator. So I wonder how many Florida fans just threw their computer or phone out the window with that.
All right, so number one, Steven. Oh, this fan base is probably going to disagree with you.
Mike, I've got Ryan Grubb from Alabama at number one. I will also kind of reiterate that I think the top 8 to 9 are all pretty close. I know maybe the offense was not as physical. It was too one-dimensional at times for Alabama. But also Ryan Grubb, whether he's been at Fresno State, whether he's been at Washington and Alabama with Kalen DeBoer, they have been pretty productive on offense, and they've done good work with quarterbacks. Ty Simpson was a first rounder. Obviously, Grubb was in the NFL, but Jalen Milroe developing. So I think Ryan Grubb's probably better than the stat sheet showed last year. If you don't like him at 1, I won't disagree with you. I mean, Buster Faulkner, Bobo, Beck, some of these other guys could easily be ranked number 1.
Ooh.
Not a strong endorsement of our ranking. Sorry.
No, but again, it's difficult when we don't have Kiffin here, Heupel, Sark. Who else am I missing here? Levy, we factor these guys in. That's what people are going to miss. They're just going to see Grubb number 1, and they're going to get mad as hell, Steven. I can promise you that. I can't wait to tag you on that one.
Oh man, people getting mad on the internet. It's a day that it's live, right? Mike, who do you like as the best offensive coordinator out of this ranking? Do you like Grubb, or would you go with someone else?
Again, we're just doing coordinators here, so I would probably put Bobo up there, and maybe even Charlie Weiss. Again, if he was, like some people say, he's been the coordinator or at least play caller at Ole Miss for several years, and they've been quite standout, obviously. So I would factor him in there. I'm high on Briles. But again, I don't think these are bad. I think Ryan Grubb, it's hard to be an offensive coordinator when you don't have an offensive line. People seem to overlook that fact. You can't run the football, and they blame that all on him. I don't know that that's his doing.
It's up to him this year to get it fixed, right? With all of the transfers they brought in on the offensive line. So, I think maybe the upside would be year 2, more of his guys on offense, maybe stylistically, schemes. So if you told me that Charlie Weiss Jr. was calling every play for Ole Miss the last couple of years, I would probably have him number 1 on this list. You could, like I said, Sark, Heupel, Levy, individually as a play caller could all be higher on this list too. It's a very, very close ranking here among top offensive coordinators.
Hey, shout out Mizzou fan number 7. Steven, he just gifted 20 memberships. We'll get to those at the end. I do appreciate you, Mizzou fan. And he also gave us a generous donation. Uh-oh, phone's going off. Drake and Mizzou staff, top 5. I'm delusional, but I'm not delusional enough to think he's got number 1. What's your thoughts on that, Steve? Where would you ballpark Missouri's overall staff here?
It's a good question. I don't know if I'd go top 5, but maybe 6 through 8 somewhere. I would say top half of the SEC. Mike, do you think that's fair? I'm just trying to like do the math in my head, like, the Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Georgia, LSU, probably all up there.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got a lot of good coaches,
Mhm.
particularly on the defensive side of the football.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I absolutely. I think they would be top half.
I think top half. I don't know if I'd go top 5, but they're close for sure.
Oops. Okay. All right. So, Steven, let us get into the defense of coordinators. Let's do the same thing. Start at the bottom. Interesting. Number 16. Steven, why do you hate this team?
Mike, we're going with Steve Gregory for Vanderbilt, the defensive coordinator, largely because, yes, Steve Gregory is the play caller, but this is still Clark Lee's defense. Steve Gregory, coming off his first season as defensive coordinator, really solid last year, 23 points a game allowed in SEC play. I would like to see this group get better against the pass and also be better on a per play basis. Lack of experience. How much of it is Lee? How much of it is Gregory? That's why he's 16.
Yeah, and not that they have a ton of talent to work with. That's we give them all this praise for the offense, but and not that I know they had some star players, but it's not like they were star studded all over there. But if you want to just look at the biggest disparity in the conference last year, like one side being elite, one side being poor, it was Vanderbilt's offense being elite. Their defense couldn't stop a bloody nose till they were playing Tennessee for some reason. So I think this is fair, but I also think it's a little bit hard to judge them because I know they don't have a ton of elite talent.
I agree with that. I think, and especially with what the turnover in personnel, I think 5 returning starters this season. So I think the upside is the 23 points a game in SEC play was pretty solid, but you still would like to see more. Maybe we start to see that in year 2. I think big picture, Mike, I do think, and you and I have talked a little bit about this. I thought when Clark Lee was hired, like Vanderbilt's defense would be consistently probably better than it has been. It hasn't been bad at times, but I thought it would be better. I know the talent level isn't at like it is at Texas and A&M and Oklahoma, but I would like to see more from this side of the ball starting in 2026 because they'll need it.
All right, so number 15, Steven, I got a feeling this fan base is not sending you any Christmas gifts.
Mike, I think there's a Kentucky fan that is consistently angry with you. But he's about to be even maybe more angry with me now. Jay Bateman of Kentucky. I am not a fan of Will Stein's coordinator hires right now. Jay Bateman was at Florida. He was at Texas A&M. Mike Elko basically demoted him, and now that is why he's the defensive coordinator at Kentucky. Jay Bateman was great some years ago at Army. He has not been that great since then. Did not go well at North Carolina when he was the defensive coordinator there. So, Mike, if you want to weigh the Army tenure more, he would rank a little higher, but recency bias, not a great run here for Jay Bateman as defensive coordinator.
Well, at least he's not 16th like the offensive.
Yeah. Had to switch it up a little bit, right?
What are we doing, Stein? What are we doing? Again, happy to be wrong. They deserve a winner up there, but I think you nailed it. But did you nail number 14, Steven? This guy's got some history in the Southeastern Conference. Basically, all these guys from here on up, as I look at it here, but it's very, very loaded here in defensive coordinators, in my opinion.
Mike, defensive coordinators was way harder to rank than offensive coordinators. This is a loaded group. And if Ron Roberts is your 14th best defensive coordinator, I think that kind of underscores it. I think he's the right hire for Arkansas because I think they need to get serious about this side of the ball. A veteran defensive coordinator with proven experience in the SEC. He's been at Florida. He's been at Auburn. The Florida defense is 12th in the SEC in back-to-back years of points allowed. Obviously, that's probably not maximizing the talent as much as Florida's had in there. His 10 years at Baylor and Auburn went better. And so I think there's a solid defensive coordinator somewhere in there, but the recency bias on this one at Florida was not as maybe as productive as I thought we would see.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely fair, Stephen. Absolutely. And mm, I don't know. Now, it's funny. It's because the second time Arkansas tried to hire him, then Auburn stole him out. And then he was another one that called out Hugh Freeze
That's right.
for the freaking gravedigger, which, I've Freeze, we all know is a dumbass, but he's not a defensive coach. So I will put that on Ron Roberts. You can't allow the gravedigger to happen yet. It did happen under his watch.
Yeah, Mike, if even if Hugh Freeze called that defense or asked for it, you know he was going to throw somebody under the bus, right?
All right, number 13. I could see that. I could believe this guy this low on Steven's list, but again, not knocking it because we got a lot of great coordinators in the Southeastern Conference.
Mike, the challenge with the defensive coordinators was when I put the list together and then I made some notes on each guy, I kept thinking, this guy could be higher. This guy could be higher. They all can't be the top five. So Brad White from Florida is number 13 on the list. I think, like I said, you could make an argument he should be much higher. He has worked under two defensive minded head coaches now. It was Mark Stoops. Now it's John Sumrall. How much of the defense was Stoops? How much of it was Brad White? They were third in the SEC in 2022, but they did kind of slip on the stat sheet a little bit the last couple of years. So it is hard year after year to build elite defenses at Kentucky. So I think Brad White's really solid. I think Florida's defense with Summerall and White working together will also get a lot better right away.
Yeah, and I wonder if, again, I think Florida fans are pretty fired up to have both these guys, but I wonder if it hurts them at all that everybody just talks about Buster Faulkner. And it's kind of like Brad White, a little bit of an afterthought. Was at Kentucky, like you said, up and down. But similar to what we said about Vanderbilt, it's not like he had a ton of talent to work with. Got a lot of guys to the NFL, very good developing talent. He's got the track record with John Summerall, so Summerall's obviously comfortable with him, and he likes the system that he runs. So there's a lot of reasons to think that Brad White's going to do really well in Gainesville with more talent, perhaps, than he ever had to work with in Lexington.
I think the Buster Faulkner, Brad White coordinator combo probably already one of the better ones in the SEC. Because Mike, like you said, I mean, if they were getting productive defenses at Kentucky with that level of talent, now you're going to a defense at Florida that's got, Jaden Woods and a handful of other guys with enormous upside. They just haven't met their potential yet. So he's 13th on the list, Mike, but he's probably a top 20 defensive coordinator nationally. I think that's how loaded this list is.
All right, so who you got number 12, Stephen?
I think we might get some people to yell at me for this one, Mike. So I need you to either defend me or tell me I'm stupid. I've got Corey Batoon from Missouri at 12. He kind of bounced around as a defensive assistant before coming to Missouri. I think a lot of people looked at this skeptically after Blake Baker left, but SEC only games, 13th in points allowed in 2024, 5th last season, trending in the right direction, no question. I think you could argue he should be much closer to middle of the conference. But given how loaded this is, being 12th on this list, Mike, I don't think there's no shame in that. I think that's just speaking to the depth here. And obviously it is a massive, massive year for him, given the turnover that they have. So he's 12th, but I think he's a pretty dang good defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it at the end. I mean, this will be a defining year for him. I think he's done a lot better job than I anticipated when Drink announced that hire. So I think he is proven to be a very good hire for Missouri. But I have not seen enough to say he's elite either. I mean, again, you've laid it all out there. They were very effective on defense last season, losing literally every starter. It's going to be tough. Now, so if they're a top half defense, then this guy might be a top 5 coordinator in the conference. I mean, it could be that big of a year for him.
I would agree. I think if Missouri reloads effectively on defense, Mike, I think he's easily one of the top 6 to 8 defensive coordinators, and we're talking about like elite company there. So I think that if they reload and are as good again on defense, I think that speaks very well to Corey Batoon's ability to rank much higher in this list next offseason.
All right, Stephen, who you got? Number 11.
Mike, this is the first kind of dilemma here. So we're going to go with Brian Brown, essentially Pete Golding, from Ole Miss. So Brian Brown, former Ole Miss player, he was a defensive coordinator before at Louisville and Cincinnati. Didn't really go well at either stop, but essentially this is trying to weigh Brian Brown on his own and also Pete Golding. If you look at just Corey Batoon, he should probably rank higher on his own on the merits, but because this is Pete Golding's defense, because he's the play caller, I gave Brian Brown a little bit of a bump here because it is Pete Golding's defense.
Would it change at all with Patrick Toney? For those that missed it, Patrick Toney was the hire, and then I think he was at the NFL, and then he went back to the NFL after he spent a week in college. He said, "I'm going back to the NFL."
What was your favorite moment of the Patrick Toney era, Mike? I think it'd probably be about the same. I think if you're just ranking play callers, I think Pete Golding on his own could be much higher on this list. But because we're ranking the coordinator and trying to weigh both, that's why he's 11th and not higher.
All right, so number 10, I think this is going to give people an idea how many good defensive play callers there are in the conference. Who do you got number 10, Stephen?
Clayton White of South Carolina. And Mike, I kept coming back to when I was putting this together. I kept coming back to Clayton White and saying, man, I think I'm just too low on him. And he's been a really solid defensive coordinator. But I will note, in SEC-only games, since Clayton White has been defensive coordinator, South Carolina only has one finish higher than 7th in points allowed in SEC-only games. So most seasons, they've been kind of at the back half of the conference, albeit they haven't had a lot of help offensively at times. So I think he could be much higher on this list, but also think when you see the other names here, I think it's going to make sense of why he ends up being 10. Like I said, he's probably a top 20 coordinator nationally. There's just a lot of really, really good play callers in this conference.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said there. So I think you nailed it. But did you nail number 9, Stephen?
Zach Arnett, Mike. I am very, very interested to see how this hire works out. I think it is a great hire for Jeff Lebby. I think the styles play well. You've got the high-powered offense and a defense that likes to get the ball back, get some pressure. They could be creative. They could do something different that's hard to prepare for. When Zach Arnett was the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State was 6th, 9th, and 7th in the SEC in scoring defense. Obviously, not working with elite level like Oklahoma and Texas talent, so some room to improve. But Mike, let's keep in mind, Coleman Hutzler was probably the 16th best defensive coordinator. Zach Arnett's in the top, essentially half of the SEC. That's a big upgrade for Mississippi State.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Stephen. This is somewhat similar to Carolina upgrading their offensive coordinator to a huge extent. I think Mississippi State just did the same thing with their defense to go from the worst to a guy that was so good that he landed the head coaching job. I know it was under terrible tragedy, but his defense was the strength of Mississippi State in Leach's last season when they won 9 games. So this guy's a hell of a defensive coach.
Yeah, knows the program from his previous stint, Mike, and I think the defense for Mississippi State, if they could just be like middle of the pack with the way that we know Lebby and Kamario Taylor are going to score points, I mean, that's a recipe that Mississippi State can go from like 5 wins to 7 wins and take that step forward. So I think, given the situation Lebby was in, to go out and hire a coach of Arnett's credentials and also the prior history, that's a big time type of move for Mississippi State.
And I think it also goes to show his lack of ego, that he's willing to come back in as an assistant after being a head coach briefly there. So Again, I got nothing bad to say about Arnett there. All right, so now number 8, Steven.
Mike, let's go to Knoxville and talk about Jim Knowles. Hard coordinator to rank, because if you did defensive coordinator rankings prior to last season, he was probably one of the better defensive coordinators in the country. You have to knock him a bit because Penn State struggled on defense last year when they really shouldn't, albeit there was a lot going on when James Franklin was fired. So there were some injuries too. I suspect that he is going to bounce back in a big way at Tennessee. I think Tennessee will be much better on defense this year. He has also put together good defenses at Ohio State, Oklahoma State, and Duke. Hard to rank him considering what happened last year. Like, recency bias almost pushes him down. The track record, though, is that he is probably a top 10 defensive coordinator in college football.
Ooh. Top 10. And number 8 in the SEC. What, Steven? Again, there's a lot of good ones here. But, yeah, just being near the middle of the road, Tennessee will take that after last year. I mean, that's not good enough for long term, but that would be a huge step in the right direction.
Middle of the road defense might have got Tennessee back in the playoff last year, right? Some of those close games. Think about the Georgia game, some of the others.
I don't want to think about them, but I think you're absolutely right, Steven. I think you're absolutely right. All right, so again, number 7, defensive coordinator in the SEC, Steven.
Kane Womack, Mike, back-to-back years in the top 5 in SEC-only games in points allowed. Think this will be one of the better defenses again. I am curious to see they made the emphasis on getting better up front, more physical. Does the transfers help them achieve that? Would also like to see Alabama cut down on some of the big plays allowed. They allowed 23 of 30 plus yards. Would like to see that number be a little bit lower in 2026. But back-to-back top 5 ranked defenses in the SEC. I think Kane Womack, the recency bias probably gets him the nod over Jim Knowles. But still, like I said, Mike, these are probably top 10 defensive coordinators in the country that we're sorting through.
Yeah, he's done a heck of a job. Big part of why Alabama got to the college football playoff last year. And I think there's a case to be made. Bama's defense can be even better this year. So no complaints with that one. How about number 6, Steven?
Mike, we're going to stay in the state of Alabama and talk about DJ Durkin. Last 2 years in the SEC, they've been 8th in the conference in scoring defense. There's no shame in that. There's a lot of good defenses, but I think give DJ Durkin credit for being the interim coach, steadying the ship after the disaster that was Hugh Freeze. They will be tested this year, obviously, with the personnel turnover. Consistently solid under DJ Durkin. And I hate to reiterate the point, Mike, if DJ Durkin is the 6th best defensive coordinator, this is a dang good group of defensive coordinators in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. He was probably a hair away from being the head coach. Just had to beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I can't knock that at all. I mean, he is, again, I know people don't like him for other reasons for being back at Maryland, but he has really redeemed himself in the eyes of the coaching world. A&M, Ole Miss, now Auburn. I mean, the guys put in a ton of time here in the SEC.
And Mike, this goes back some ways, but before he was the Maryland head coach, I remember we actually had some coach scouting in our magazine that talked about how highly regarded other coaches were, and just thought that he was going to be one of the next rising star defensive coordinators or head coaches. So, obviously there was a lot at Maryland, and certainly that was why he was unemployed for a bit. But as a defensive coordinator in the SEC the last couple of years, I mean, he's been top 6, 7, 8 in the conference as far as success.
So who you got? Now we're in the top 5, Steven, number 5.
Mike, this is tough because how do you weigh Kirby Smart versus Glenn Schumann? But it's Glenn Schumann at 5. I did knock him down a bit because I mean, let's be honest, Kirby Smart, right? He's one of the best defensive minds in the country. Probably won't be long until Glenn Schumann is a head coach if he wants to be in that role. Georgia consistently one of the best defenses in the country. No reason to believe that will change in 2026.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me too because again, Georgia, all the Texas fans, which rightfully so, they should say Georgia's taking a step back since Muschamp stepped away, which I think is fair. But again, they were elite of elite, and they had 10 NFL defensive linemen.
Right.
Haven't quite had that depth, and they've not been as good, even though they had moments last year of being a dominant defense. They had a lot of busts too, though. Thinking back to the Tennessee game, Ole Miss game, really both Ole Miss games. So how much is that Glenn Schumann? I don't think I don't know how fair it is to shoulder most of that on him. I think it's Georgia losing a ton of depth via the transfer portal. I think that has negatively affected some people's opinion, perhaps, of Schumann.
I was going to say, I think Georgia probably has, like, there are some areas you could point to and say they need to be better here. Like you said, big plays, pass rush at times. I think those are all things that are kind of a product of just the current era of college football. I mean, think about those defenses that won the national championship and the waves of players you could stack and develop and deploy. Whereas now it's really hard to keep guys on second and third string. So I think if there has been some regression into whatever level it is, it's probably because it's harder to keep like the really, really talented players on the bench for a couple years, and there's a bigger transition period. This year, if they don't play well on defense, then we will have a problem. But I do think a lot of this is just kind of the current climate of college football.
Okay, number 4, Steven, who you got?
Mike, let's go with Blake Baker out at LSU. I think it was a massive early off-season win for Lane Kiffin to keep Blake Baker and to keep him away from maybe being the head coach at Tulane. This defense was put into bad situations last year by the offense. I think the good news for Blake Baker, he's going to have a lot more offensive help this year. So he could probably get a little bit creative, maybe get a little bit aggressive at times. But also, Mike, I think about this from like an autonomy standpoint, because Lane Kiffin is such an offensive-minded head coach that this is Blake Baker's side of the ball. He's got total control. Obviously they will probably get some input from Kiffin on recruiting and transfers. But this is his side of the ball. And I think now with more help on offense, it's only going to make this offense perform better. There'll be a little bit more help each game. So I think he's one of the top. I've got him 4th. I could maybe have him a spot or 2 higher. I think he's one of the better defensive coordinators in the country.
Yeah, they were really poor from what I remember at Missouri before he got there.
Yeah.
He's done a good job. I know, again, last year was a huge disappointment for LSU, but it was not due to the defense, in my opinion. I mean, they held their own. So if they could keep that level, and I know they're anticipating to be even better, but if they can keep that level and have a competent offense, that's a reason to really believe in LSU. So I like Baker all the way up here at number 4. I think a lot of people underrate him, but I'm glad you don't, Steven. I'm glad you don't.
I think, Mike, you and I have talked a little bit about this offseason, but man, with that early game against Ole Miss, Clemson, Texas A&M, it might be Blake Baker's defense early on that makes or breaks the playoff run as the offense kind of is in transition.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I also think it's fair to question your Texas homerism at number 3.
Mike, Will Muschamp is at number 3. And I know you expected him to be number 1 on this list, but that's he's 3rd. Mike, I think the interesting storyline for me is Texas was pretty good on defense under Pete Kwiatkowski. Now they hope to go to elite under Will Muschamp. And so I'm going to be fascinated just to see the seasonal development of this group. What tweaks does Will Muschamp make this year? He hasn't been an on-field play caller for a few years. Maybe that's why he's 3 and not 2. I think just based upon track record and history, he's one of the best in college football. But also, I think there is also a lot of pressure on him, given that they haven't been bad, but they got to be better if they want to win the national championship, and that's the standard for Will Muschamp this year.
Well, folks, we know he's drinking that burnt orange Kool-Aid with that selection. That's just crazy, Steve. That might be the one you've missed the most.
You think he's too high?
Oh, yeah. I think we're living. Looking at it in the comments, we were elite in 2009 when we had good God, it's 26. Didn't this guy wasn't he on his couch last fall? I mean, again, that doesn't make him bad, but I don't think he's jumping off the couch and he's top 3 in the SEC, but he's got the talent. He's got no excuses.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there really is no excuses with Colin Simmons and Rasheem Biles and a great secondary potentially coming together. I mean, if this doesn't work out for Sarkisian, I mean, talk about like a major whiff here. Kwiatkowski wasn't bad, and you switch to Muschamp, and if you miss, that would be an all-time kind of setback, or maybe shooting yourself in the own foot, essentially.
Right. I'm trying to think who they'd get. Maybe. I was going to say Brent Venables, but I don't think he's getting fired this year.
Blake Baker, offer a bunch of money.
All right, so number 2, Steve, an interesting one here.
So, Mike, it's Lyle Hemphill, but it's really Mike Elko. So, like I said, it's hard to weigh somebody with the title and the actual who has the play sheet. But the reason why he's 2 is that it's kind of just a projection that A&M's defense is going to be really good once again. Lyle Hemphill has worked under a lot of good coaches like Dave Clawson, obviously Mike Elko. He was also the defensive coordinator at James Madison in 2024. They led the Sun Belt in scoring defense. So, yes, this is Lyle Hemphill. This is more about Texas A&M. This is Mike Elko's defense, and Hemphill, in whatever capacity, will execute that defense.
I think that's the first time a lot of these people have heard of old Lyle here, Steven. So, but I think that's, again, this is difficult, hard to rank these guys. But I don't think it was very hard for you to rank number 1.
Not hard at all, Mike. This was one of the easiest rankings, is to put Todd Bates, really Brent Venables, number 1. Todd Bates, outstanding defensive tackles, defensive line coach, but Brent Venables is the play caller. We saw last year how much better Oklahoma's defense got with Brent Venables calling the plays. Whether it was first in success rate, whatever metric you want to look at, even if it takes a small step back this year, it's still one of the best defenses in the country. And Brent Venables / Todd Bates is a big reason why.
Yeah, no debate on that one for me. So we've got about 90 minutes, Stephen. Let's get into the head coaching rankings. And I've got my own as well to let you know where you're wrong. Let's just keep the theme going. Let's start at the bottom. What do you got? 16.
Mike, I've got Will Stein. Obviously a first-time head coach. I love the offensive acumen that we saw at Oregon. I think that should translate, provided he doesn't give too much away to Joe Sloan. But a first-time head coach, I think he's got to start at 16 for me.
Yeah, I've got him there too, and I think that's fair. I mean, we're not saying he's the worst, but it's almost like an incomplete for me.
Yeah. I think,
whereas everybody else has got at least some kind of track record to go off of.
Right. That's the thing, is like when you start looking at like the other names on this list, is even if you have questions, I don't necessarily mind ranking a first-time head coach ahead of some guys with experience. But I think if you're not going to call plays and you're a first-time head coach, the other guys have experience as a head coach or in the SEC, I think that kind of weighed for me over some of these names that are 13, 14, 15.
Okay, so who do you got 15?
Mike, I've got Ryan Silverfield. And I think if you just look at the last couple years at Memphis, 29-9 over those last 3 years. Sure, you could criticize him for not winning the American. Maybe they needed to be a little bit better overall, given their talent and resource advantage. But also, I mean, still a pretty solid head coach in one of the better G6 conferences. And also, I think he's got a good grasp on the modern era of college football, knowing how to take transfers, roster building, NIL. He's got a lot to prove, though, as a new coach in the SEC, and that's why he's 15.
So I think you've underrated him a little, Stephen. I went 13th because I do think he's done a good job at Memphis. Again, you laid it out there. I mean, he was, from what I understand, at the most resource program in that conference, and he didn't win it. So that I don't like. But at least he's got a track record. And I can't sit here, and I say this every time, Stephen. I say I would not hire a guy and there are examples, Kirby, Dan Mullen at Mississippi State. There are examples. I would never hire a guy that's not been a head coach. It can work. Heck, I hope it works for Will Stein, but there's just no time to learn on the job. So I can't say that. I say that every offseason and then turn around and be like, well, they hired Silverfield, who's won a bunch of games at Memphis. Let's put him at the bottom. So I put him 13th because at least he's got that track record. At least we know we've hired a competent head coach. Now, can he do it in this conference? Can he beat the better teams? He's not really proven that. But I think he's proven a little bit more than some of the other guys that I have below him.
So far, I think he's done exactly what he needed to do. I mean, I think he's hired a pretty quality staff. I think they brought in a good transfer class to restock the roster. I don't think the ceiling is particularly very high, but I think if you had skepticism at the start, I think at least maybe he's kind of put some of those concerns to rest. And then I think the proof will be how do they perform this year. But I think you're right in the big picture of there's no time to get the ground running. They were 2-10. He's got head coaching experience. I think that gives him an edge maybe on some of these other guys who are just first-time head coaches.
All right, so who do you have as the 14th best head coach in the SEC, Stephen?
I've got Jeff Lebby. I think the positive, Mike, 2-10 to 5-8, a step forward. Also hiring Zach Arnett. That is the right hire to improve the defense. The Coleman Hutzler move was awful from the beginning. I think the Zach Arnett hire is going to be better to get this defense on track to go with a high-powered offense. And I think, Mike, in the big picture for Jeff Lebby too, I need to see him close the door in some of these games. The margins in the SEC are so tight. Like, you can't afford to have games where you botch the ending. Mississippi State's roster talent's not going to be in the top 5 of the conference. You've got to win on the margins. You can't give away victories when they're right there. So I need to see Lebby continue to grow as a head coach, but I think some of the roster and coaching moves have been a positive.
No, I agree. But you know what I don't agree, Stephen? I think you got him overrated. Give me 15th for Lebby. So of the coaches that have actually coached, I put him dead last. He's blown too many games. And again, he's an example of what I was just talking about. He's still learning. He's learning all that, which that's fantastic. But this is year 3. And what has he won? 2 conference games, I think, in 3 years? I mean, this is
one, I thought, right?
One. I mean, that's crazy. Yeah. Mississippi State, we're supposed to compete for every damn game. No, we're not going to win every single game. No, hardly anyone does. But I mean, we are not even competitive in a lot of these games, and the ones we are, we blow at the end. So I don't know, man. I'm pretty down on him. Again, I like the Arnett hire. Hopefully that fixes a lot of it, but I can't put him any higher than 15th.
There is no time to learn in the SEC, especially at a place like Mississippi State, where you have got to maximize every resource possible. And when you give away games like that, it is a missed opportunity. So 1 in 15 in SEC play in his first 2 years, Mike, I think there needs to be some pretty significant growth this year to ensure that the Jeff Lebby era continues into 2027.
I agree. Okay, so who do you, Steven, have 13th?
I've got Pete Golding. Mike, so far so good. 2 playoff wins, 1 drive away from playing for the national championship, handled the transition from Lane Kiffin well. I like what he did on the roster front too. I also think Pete Golding's hired a good staff so far. The only reason he's not higher, it's just different. It's different being in the big chair all season. It's easy to step in as an interim for that playoff stint and keep things going. A lot of upside, though. If he wins this year, I think he'll shoot up this list. But just 3 games into the Pete Golding era, it's hard to rank him much higher.
Ooh. Not for me, Steven.
Ooh.
Not for me.
All right.
I got him as number 10. Now, that's probably way too high. But last time he's got more playoff wins at his current job than DeBoer, Kiffin doesn't have a damn one of them. Elko, Heupel, Venables. I mean, this guy's playoff elite, Steven. So again, maybe I'm overrating his ass, but I like old Cheat Golding and his living in the gray. I think I think he's a perfect fit for Ole Miss.
He's got also the same amount of playoff victories as Sark, with 2.
Right.
So Mike, I will say it is interesting to kind of. I'll be curious to see your rankings because this is his first full season as a head coach. It's a little different being the interim and he's been on staff. I'm curious to see the names around him because of knocking Lebby and knocking Will Stein for his lack of head coaching experience and seeing Golding close to the top 10. So I'm curious to see your list now. I didn't feel good about mine, so now I'm really curious to see yours.
All right, so who you got? Number 12, Steven.
Mike, I think Auburn actually hired an offensive mastermind. I think Alex Golesh will do what Hugh Freeze didn't do. So I have Alex Golesh at 12. Really solid tenure over at South Florida. 23 victories over 3 years. Nearly played for the American Conference title in 2025. And like I said, Mike, he actually knows offense. Auburn's offense will get better. So give me Alex Golesh at 12.
Okay, I don't think you're that far off. I put him 14th. Again, I'm not saying he's bad. I think we've upgraded overall our coaching roster in the Southeastern Conference this offseason, but I also tended to give a little bit more respect to guys that have done it in the Southeastern Conference for the most part. I don't want to overrate guys that are just walking in and have 0 losses in this league, so we automatically are fired up about them, whereas some of these other guys get wins and we kind of forget about it because they have losses as well. But so no knock on Golesh, but if I'm not mistaken, Steven, I think old Silver Fox got him a couple times.
They beat him last year, yeah. And the
Right.
game of South Florida, I believe, was a favorite in that game.
So that is all I need to know. Put his ass behind Silver Fox. I think Golesh I think he'll do quite well. I think he's a massive upgrade over the last fool they had. So, but again, he's just got to prove it to me before I give him any consideration to be higher on this list.
I thought Golesh did a better job in the American compared to Silverfield. So that's kind of why I went with Golesh over Silverfield. But noted, I think the bottom tier is kind of like clustered together. It felt like, I don't know, like 10 through 15 or so. I think you could jostle them up a little bit. I'd be curious to see. I felt like the next kind of tier of coaches, it gets a little tougher from here, doesn't it?
It does. Right there, number 11. Who you got, Steven?
I got Shane Beamer, Mike, 33 and 30 overall. Only 1 winning season in SEC play. That run to nearly making the playoff in 2024 was great, but man, it has been a roller coaster because it's like 8-5 to 5-7, 9-4 to 4-8. I would like to see just more consistency here, and what is a very critical year for Shane Beamer.
Yeah, I think you nailed this one, Steven. So that's where I've got Beamer as well. Again, give him some respect for, what is this, 6 years in the SEC. So, he's been around the block. He's won some games. Fortunately, he's lost some games that he probably shouldn't. So I think he's good, but clearly this is going to be a defining year. I mean, hell, he's even said it himself, which I like when these guys are honest. Even I don't know if you caught it, but he did an interview with the South Carolina outlet, and he referenced on the hot seat that he's sitting on. So I like that. I like when these guys don't run from it and try to pretend like everything's, jobs are on the line this season basically, and he's not running from it.
Also, a little bit of history too. Like if you go back to when his dad was the head coach at Virginia Tech, I mean, they had to navigate some pretty tough times early on. Like I don't think Frank Beamer, if he was the head coach in like the 2020s, probably would have lasted that early kind of rough period there. So I think the pressure and stuff, I think you have to kind of embrace it, at least publicly, to show that fans like, hey, there's urgency here to turn this around. And I think that urgency is a good thing for South Carolina this year.
All right, we're into the top 10. Stephen, who do you got as the number 10 coach in the SEC?
Mike, he has not coached a game as a head coach in the SEC, but he grew up in the SEC footprint. He played at Kentucky. He's coached in the footprint, and that is John Sumrall. I think this is one of the best head coaching hires for 2026. No pressure, because John Sumrall won 2 Sun Belt titles at Troy, and Tulane played for the American Conference title in both seasons. So, Mike, if history is right, John Sumrall will take Florida to play for the SEC championship game this year. I think that's probably too much to ask, but I think this program will get more out of the roster. They will develop talent, and I think they'll just take a step forward this year.
Yeah, I like everything you just said. I've got him one spot higher, number 9. So we're on the mark here. Again, I like to give credit to these guys that have been in the conference, so that's why he didn't rate any higher. But breaking the rule a little bit to give him a little bit more love than some of these experienced Southeastern Conference coaches. But I think John Sumrall, if Florida fans can put up with someone not scoring 40, 50 points per game, I think they're gonna do well with Coach Sumrall.
May not be the fun and gun, but I think we got to come up with a name for Buster Faulkner's offense, because it is going to be fun. It may not be like 40 points a game, but it'll be fun.
I think so too. All right, so we're inside the top 10. Number 9, Stephen.
I've got Clark Lee at 9. I think you could make a case he could be higher based upon the last 2 years. 9-27 to start his tenure. So kind of a mixed bag. Like, are you rating the last 2 years or the total tenure? And that's kind of where he falls for me, which is essentially in the middle of the conference. I like the adjustments that he's made on his coaching staff, evaluating the portal. All of those are good things, and especially the success for the last 2 years moved him up this list significantly from 2023.
Yeah, that's fair, Stephen, but I am not there with you. Give me number 12 for Clark Lee. I've seen too much ugly
Right.
from the Vanderbilt Commodore. Now, again, I was very, very pleased with the last last year in particular, but 2 years. He's done a hell of a job. How much of that is Pavia? How much of that is Tim Beck and the New Mexico State Mafia? I don't know. I mean, he's got to keep that thing afloat. He's got to win a lot more games this year to be considered a top 10 coach in this conference. Again, they've been just dreadful. So again, maybe I'm being harsh, but I've just seen too much bad football. I'm rooting for him. The arrow is pointed up. I think he will stick around. I think he'll be a hell of a hire for Vanderbilt. But he's got to be a little bit more. Let's see what he is without Diego Pavia.
If Vanderbilt goes 6-6 this year, would that be a successful year for them, you think?
Probably. Well, I don't think they'd consider it.
I actually think it would. You have a toss-up non-conference game against NC State. Yes, you do get Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State Those are 3 teams that are going to be picked. And in Auburn, they're going to be picked in the back half of the SEC. I mean, you also get Tennessee at your place. Given that you lose Diego Pavia, one of the best players in school history, I think just getting to a bowl game would be a successful year. And I think that kind of gets at your point, which is, I mean, we need to see more. Like, how much of that was Pavia? You give Clark Lee the credit for hiring and bringing those guys in. But, man, the 3 years before that were pretty ugly at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a guy that's come in and said we're trying to win championships. What is this, year 6 or year 7? We're going 6-6. I don't know. You go from the playoff bubble to just barely making a bowl. I don't know that that's. I think it'd be what everybody says. It's like it was just Diego Pavia. I think that would be the narrative.
I think if they go 8-4 or 9-3, I think any kind of question becomes like moot. It basically becomes like, this is Clark Lee. Yes, Diego Pavia was great, but I think there's a lot of Clark Lee's influence on that win total this year, which he would probably skyrocket my list next year if that's the case.
Stephen, if Vanderbilt wins 9 games, we're going to be saying, how soon's Bama going to hire this guy?
Right. Or Texas, Mike, if you think Texas, like, your W's and L's on Texas to be 7-5 this year, like, threw everybody off. So,
all right, number 8, coach of the SEC, Stephen.
I got Brent Venables, Mike. I think he's on the move pretty consistently after last season. Coming into 2025, he was clearly on the hot seat, clearly moving up after guiding Oklahoma to the playoff. 32-20 at Oklahoma, 2 double-digit win seasons, a playoff trip. All of that's really solid. Just need to see a little bit more consistency. 6-7, double-digit wins, 6-7. Then the playoff trip last year. Would like to see Oklahoma break that streak and get back to double-digit wins this year.
I think you nailed it, Stephen. I mean, he's a little too inconsistent for my taste. 6 wins, 10 wins, 6 wins, 10 wins. He's the Shane Bieber people don't talk about. So as a head coach here, so you got to prove it to me here. I've got Venables number 8 as well. So now we're getting into the upper echelon of the head coaches in the conference. And Venables is knocking on that door, but he's not there just yet.
I agree with that. I felt like the Venables, maybe Clark Lee, John Sumrall, and the next coach on this list, and throw Golding in there. They were all kind of like in the same tier for me. Maybe this next coach was a little bit ahead of all these guys, but it was close.
All right, so who's number 7?
Mike, I've got Eli Drinkwitz at 7, coming off one of the best 3-year stretches in program history with 29 victories, but also 15-9 in SEC play. I think he's done a good job of adapting to the modern kind of era, portal recruiting. The next step is what I want to see. I want to see Eli Drinkwitz take Missouri from being 9 wins, 10 wins good to actually making the playoff. And that's the next kind of step forward for this program and staff.
Yeah, I think you nailed this one too, Stephen. That's right where I got Drink, number 7. He's made them a annual thorn in the side of many SEC teams. They're competitive every year. I think it's fair to say they've fallen short of aspirations the last couple of years, but that's because he's raised the bar so significantly. And I don't think they're going anywhere as long as Coach Eli Drinkwitz is there. And if they ever figure out the quarterback position, and they may have figured it out this year, I think that's the next phase for this program to take that next step.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 7th in the SEC is solidly a top 25 head coach. And, they've been consistently winning. I think he's made the right moves on the coordinator front, with the exception of Chip Lindsey, and they've done a good job in recruiting too. So they're checking off all the boxes. The next step is, can you put them all together and take that leap into the playoff? And with 12 teams, maybe 16 or 24 in the future, Mike, that path is open for Missouri to do just that.
All right, the number 6 coach of the SEC, Stephen.
Mike, I hope cousin Shane is not watching, or maybe he's fine with this, but I've got Josh Heupel at 6. It feels like a really critical year to show that, hey, the program is back on track after taking a step back last season. Not totally surprising necessarily, but still, I think an important year. I think Heupel also understands that, given the moves they made for Jim Knowles and the strength and conditioning. Consistently producing great offenses, and they've won what is it, like eight games at least in each of the last 4 years, and they've made the playoff. This is a really, really solid resume for Josh Heupel.
Yeah, I think you nailed this one too, Stephen. That's right where I have Heupel, number 6. Some other people don't have him quite this high, and I struggled. I almost put him number 5, but I did drop him a spot after last year. Not that last year was bad. Well, I mean, by their standards, it kind of was, but again, that just shows how much they've raised the bar there. But he's got to get better with decision making, play calling, not play calling, but end of game management. I think that's been a real issue. But again, number 6. I mean, we're talking pretty dang good coach, I would think, and a very, very little separation in my book between 3 and 6. I mean, all these guys, in my opinion, are kind of grouped together.
I had 2, 3, and 4 in their own tier, with 5 and 6 grouped together because I thought 5 and 6 were close. So, I guess in the big picture, these were all like top 15 coaches nationally. This is a really, really solid haul at the top for the SEC.
Okay, now we're in the top 5. Stephen, who you got as the number 5 coach in the SEC?
Mike, maybe I'm a prisoner of recency bias on this one, but I got to go with Mike Elko, 19-7 in 2 years at Texas A&M, and I think there's a broader shift because it's no longer talking about the potential. It feels like they are actually realizing that potential. Recruiting's going well. They just made the college football playoff. Also, Mike Elko was a dang good coach back at Duke too. So he's been good at 2 different stops. And now the next step is to go beyond the first round of the college football playoff, go deeper and win a couple games in the next couple years.
Yeah, again, Steve, man, you're just too good, Stephen. I mean, I think you nailed this one. This is where I got Elko. Getting A&M to the playoff, that's massive. Now, again, you could flip-flop him, I think, with Heupel. I wouldn't have an issue. I think Heupel's that good. I think Elko's that good. The one perhaps difference maker, if you did want to switch him, he's only been at A&M 2 years, but they've been a really good 2 years, given his overall record and particularly last year getting better and better. Whereas Heupel's kind of flip-flopped, where he's, they've slightly regressed, but I don't know. I'm not seeing a massive separation. I think this year will be huge for the both of them. And I think that'll really define, these 2 guys.
I agree. I think just looking at kind of where these 2 coaches are you have a coach in Heupel who made the playoff. Now they're trying to get back. Like, does Elko does he fight the same battle this year of, hey, we made the playoff and now maybe 2026, given the coordinator of the offensive line, they take a step back. So there's some similarities there. And like, if A&M doesn't make it this year, they're fighting the same kind of question marks going into 2027. So I think these 2 coaches are really close, but I gave Elko the nod just because it kind of feels like they're starting to realize that potential of this program.
Okay, top 4, number 4 coach of the SEC, Stephen.
Mike, I wrestled with 2, 3, and 4. I could change these coaches up probably a couple different ways, but I went with Lane Kiffin at 4. We know the track record on offense. One of the best coaches probably in the modern era of navigating the transfer portal, NIL. The expectation, though, is clear. They have to win a national title now. That's what he's being brought in to do. There's all the drama, but he wins.
Yes, he'd be number 1 if this is the drama list. You know it, but he did a masterful job till the end in Oxford and getting Ole Miss to be relevant and getting them to the playoff and all that. So, We got to give him credit for that. And, there's a lot of things to say about Kiffin, but the defining thing I think is Ole Miss, top 3, winningest program in the Southeastern Conference in the last 5 seasons, I believe it is. So that's remarkable. Almost makes me want to put Kiffin a little bit higher, and I did consider it, but I've got him number 4 as well. I think you nailed it.
I think Kiffin, DeBoer, and Sarkisian are all top 10 coaches. I think the order is kind of like differs, like whatever your criteria is. But man, I mean, just the amount of wins that Kiffin accumulated at Ole Miss with the roster, the transfers, and I also think give credit to for hiring Pete Golding, realizing they needed to improve on defense. I think he's pushed all the right buttons, but the pressure level is going to go up 100% now that the expectation is to win a national title.
Right. So you've kind of teased it. Number 3, Stephen.
Mike, I've wrestled with this one, and I still might change my mind. I've got Sark at 2. I could go Kalen DeBoer here as well, 2 or 3. I think it's really close. I think if you want to make the argument for Sark, I think back-to-back playoff trips. They're 13-3 in SEC play since 2024. He's 48-20 overall at Texas. The only concern for me is all the high expectations, and they didn't meet it last year. So I would like to see if Sark gets Texas back to the playoff this year, they make a deep run. I think he's solidly probably the number 2 coach in the conference. So I wrestled with this one, Mike. I think Sark or DeBoer, 2 or 3. It's pretty close for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the exact order I have. And here's the difference in my mind, Stephen. One of these guys gets up for the big games. One of the guys fails to get up for the small games. And hey, it's the same guy. It's DeBoer. DeBoer gets up for the big games. He lets these other ones slip by. Whereas Sark, in my opinion, he consistently, I would say, fails to get his team up for a lot of these Georgia games, these Ohio State games, some of these playoff games. I mean, they were lucky to beat Arizona State, so
yeah.
That's interesting. But DeBoer loses the teams he shouldn't, whereas Sark, he takes care of business against the teams he should be beating. I know last year Mississippi State and Kentucky were very close, but again, who cares? You win the games. That's all that really matters. So he wins the games he should. I don't know if he's capable of out-coaching people for a championship, though. So that's why I got DeBoer 2, Sarkisian 3.
If Alabama didn't lose to Florida State last year, do you think it's clear that DeBoer is like second on this list? Considering, because I had the same discussion in when I was trying to go through these, I felt like the letdowns in the games. The Vanderbilt one doesn't look as bad necessarily. Like it is bad, but Vanderbilt ended up being probably better than we thought at the time. The Florida State one sticks out to me as like that's kind of inexcusable.
Right, and I'm trying to think of the coaches, Stephen. I know it's Sarkisian, Dan Lanning, and there's another one that is high up there, but it escapes me at the moment. But DeBoer is undefeated against this class of coach, and hell, he's until the SEC championship he was undefeated against Kirby. He can't beat Mike Norvell and Sharon Moore. I mean, how in the hell does that make sense? That will never make sense to me, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, it's Mike. I think a lot of it is this is the modern era of college football. I mean, I think if you're Alabama, you want to see that kind of even out a little bit, but we're so used to Nick Saban like crushing these opponents, like just demolishing everybody. And at the same time, this is kind of how it goes for the rest of college football. I mean, Sark nearly lost to Mississippi State last year. DeBoer's had these crazy losses. Kiffin had trouble with Kentucky. That's kind of the way it is right now in college football.
So then obviously Georgia, Kirby Smart, very anticlimactic. Stephen and I have the same top 8. But why Kirby number 1 for you?
Mike, I think the only question with Kirby Smart is whether he's number 1 nationally or number 2 nationally behind Kirk Cignetti. I mean, the only thing that Kirby Smart is doing at Georgia, Mike. He just wins at a high level. 9 consecutive top 10 finishes, 2 national titles. Winning double-digit games, having Georgia in the mix to win it all, despite all the changes in college football. For me, he's either number 1 or number 2 nationally, and this was one of the easiest decisions in all the coaching rankings for the SEC.
And I'm certainly not going to put him in the class of Nick Saban, because I think Nick Saban is the greatest college coach of all time. I don't really feel like that's debatable.
Mm-hmm.
But he has put him in that class where Saban was at Alabama, where if you don't win the national championship, feels like a disappointing season. And that's where Georgia's at now, in my opinion. And for a program that went, 41 years without a national title, to now be national title or bust, again, you could pick apart anything he does if you want. I mean, the fact that he's raised it to that level, Kirby's the best in the country, in my opinion.
That's a good problem to have, Mike, when the standard is the national championship, and Georgia is in that category of every preseason they are going to be number 1, number 2, or probably number 3, or certainly in the top 5. That's the standard. If Kirby will get criticism, I'm sure, if they don't win the national title or get there, but he set the bar that high. I mean, that is, like you said, that is the standard, either to go far in the playoff now. I think it's harder to win in the playoff because you have all these extra games now, where the past it would be just 4 and you had to win the 2. It's a lot harder now. I think Georgia will get there, but I also think that that's the standard now. It's like it's national title, or it's just mildly or semi disappointing if you only get bounced in the first round or second round of the playoff.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, Stephen, we've gone past 2 hours, so let's wrap this bad boy up. Before you go, as always, and thank you for all the work you did for this episode. We truly appreciate you. Can you tell the cousins how to follow you, how to find all your great work?
Absolutely. You can check out all my work over at athlonsports.com, at Athlon Steven on Twitter, Stephen L. CFB over on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, we appreciate you, Stephen. We'll be back tomorrow. The fall camp preview series continues. We're 9 in the books, 7 more to go. We've never done all 16. We're trying this year. No promises. But until then, we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Hey, buddy, this beer's for you, Mike, and Cousin Shane. That SEC podcast loves the Pirate, and the Pirate loves that SEC podcast. Hail State.